Hello, Mike. Can you hear me?
I can. How are you?
Very good. It's nice to meet you and appreciate you jumping on. We'll give folks a few more minutes to get signed in.
Excellent. And I think you will need to allow me to share my screen.
Oh, yep. I need to turn host.
Because I went on earlier and I wasn't able to. Yeah, host has disabled it. So
yeah, we need to upgrade our IANS account with Zoom so we can have more hosts. But I can turn the host rights over to you here shortly.
close my email here so I don't keep getting emails popping up.
Our lab director is currently doing an all hands meeting, so we're going to have probably quite a few people jumping in a few minutes late.
Oh, that's fine.
He's running long. Surprising.
Imagine that, right? You know, during the heat of COVID, we used to lead quite a few of these, virtual online type overviews of Vogtle. A lot of people want, to hear about Plant Vogtle. Haven't done as many recently, so it's kind of good to get back to it. But amazing thing is, an hour after I finish with you guys, I'll be doing the same thing for a middle school robotics class out of Atlanta. So I have to change gears real quick. Now, I assume some of y'all have been to the Savannah River National Labs. You think maybe?
There will be some who have.
That's across the river, Savannah River from Plant Vogtle.
Yeah, they tend to get more from the Office of Environmental Management. We're at INL, we're primarily funded out of the Office of Nuclear Energy. And in particular, well, we're kind of counterparts. I'm also in the public affairs world for the Advanced Test Reactor that we have, which is, our flagship irradiation facility.
I just thought about that. Aren't you guys? That's who Southern companies partnering with y'all, right? With the what is it? It's not TerraPower, is it?
We have some indirect support that we provide for the TerraPower project, but that's a Utah utility consortium.
Yeah, maybe I'm thinking about one of the other things. I thought I remember reading something about, because Southern Company, which Southern Nuclear Georgia Power is part of, has its own R&D, which is unusual for utilities, research and development, and we have some DOE grant money and partner with some folks. I'm not an expert on that side. I can talk about Vogtle.
Well, it looks like people are starting to jump in. John must have finished up. Give it a few more minutes.
You're just going to allow me to share them once at some point.
Yep, let me switch you to the host. Yep, you now have host rights, so you should be able to share.
All right, I'm just going to.
I'll introduce you real quick once we start.
Yeah, I just thought I would just see if you can see this thing. It's a big old green slide.
Yep, that's working.
Okay.
And since you'll be the host, it's going to try and save the recording to your machine. I'll just send you a shared folder later where you can upload the video for us. And then we like to post those on the IANS website.
Oh boy.
You share
Not,
your slide if you don't mind.
not at all. I'm good. I am trying to get where I can see. Let's see. We got 22 participants.
Yeah. Jump over here.
Are you able, will you be able to see the chats?
Yeah, I'll ask people to submit any questions on the chat and then we'll go through them at the end. See your video flying.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone who has joined in with us for our Lunch and Learn for the end of November anyway. Mike was good enough to delay for us. A lot of us took off for the holidays. I think a lot of folks have, we're in the R&D world in a big way here at Idaho National Laboratory, but we're also very interested in what's going on out in the commercial world. A lot of people probably saw very recently that the first fuel got loaded into Vogtle 3 and 4. Is it both of them?
Unit 3.
Okay. But we've got Mike McCracken here. He's the communications lead for Plan Vogtle, and he's going to give us an update on the project and how things are going. It's pretty exciting to see the first new commercial nuclear plants in the country in a very long time get close to starting up. So go ahead, Mike.
Yep, and that is so true. We are very close. Y'all, Unit 3 smells like fresh paint. You walk around Unit 3, it's painting, it's hanging, some office lights, it's testing, and testing. Unit 4 still has got some construction going on, but it's right behind it. So we're talking more about that. So everybody has different backgrounds. I know a lot of y'all have you do a lot of research in nuclear, so you know the basics. Some of y'all may have been to the Savannah River National Lab Savannah River site, which is literally across the river from Plant Vogtle. But what I want to do is focus on Plant Vogtle 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4, and just kind of show us, or show y'all kind of what is new and unique to Plant Vogtle and our company. First, Vogtle Unit 1, and I'm using my finger pointer there, and then Vogtle 2, been operating since 1987 and 1989. The large Westinghouse 4-loop, 4-steam generator units, about 1,240 megawatts each, enough electricity for 250,000 homes and businesses each. So to add them together, it's 500,000 homes and businesses worth of electricity. We run 94, 95% capacity, shut down every year and a half for about a month or so for maintenance and refueling. And quite frankly, they are the workhorse for Georgia Power and our co-owners. They're big, they're reliable, they're carbon free. Jobs, about 1,000 full-time people, counting contractors, and so forth. So this is the nuclear site. If you look over here to the left, while we're in this video, you can see some of our spent fuel canisters. Some of y'all may have an interest in that. We store our used fuel first in pools, and then we store them in canisters. And so there's some canisters inside the protected area, and then there's some canisters on the east side, or the other side facing the cooling towers. All right, so that's Vogtle 1 and 2, Burke County, Georgia. And this was right after the rain, so everything looks kind of wet. Over to the, I guess I should say the east, or more to the right on this video, is South Carolina Savannah River site. Then off on the distance, you'll see some construction of Vogtle 3 and 4. And I have a newer, more recent aerial drone video of 3 and 4. So you see 1 and 2 in the background. And then you see Unit 3 containment, shell building with a large tank of water on the top. That's a passive safety feature of the Westinghouse AP1000. This is the tank of water with the rebar around it without the concrete yet poured. This was, gosh, it's probably been almost a year ago now. This is Unit 3 turbine building. The control room is stuffed right in between here. The spent fuel pool is in this building here. So you look from right to left, you got fuel handling building, spent fuel pool, containment shield building has 1 reactor, 2 steam generators, passive cooling systems. The most obvious is a tank of water on the top. The steam comes out and turns the turbine generators in this building for unit 3, and the control room is tucked in between. So you got Vogtle 1 and 2 operating since the 80s, mid-late 80s. And then unit 3 is scheduled, and y'all, we're so close, it'd be hard. I mean, we're gonna be right at it. First quarter, March. You come out here in April, you should see vapor coming out of the top of the cooling towers like you do over here at 1 and 2. And then unit 4 by the end of next year. Okay, so you come out here in 2024, you should see vapor coming out of all 4 of these cooling towers 90% of the time. Okay, and then about every 18 months or so, one of these 4 units in the spring and the fall, when the demand for electricity is less, will be shut down for 20, 25 days or so for refueling and maintenance. Otherwise, we run 24/7, pedal to the metal, 100% power. I'm going to see what kind of chats I have real quick here. Yeah, I'm going to probably stop couple times and look at the chats, but for right now, I'm going to go. So again, some of y'all have probably researched PhDs on what I'm about to show here, but this is the basics for a pressurized water reactor. 1 pressure vessel down here in the bottom, and either 2, 3, or 4 steam generators. Vogtle 1 has 4 steam generators. Vogtle 2 has 4 steam generators, about 5,000 tubes each. The new AP1000 plants that we're about to start up have 2 each, but they're twice as large as far as tubes inside of them, about 10,000 tubes each. They are gigantic. All right, and then of course, all modern nuclear plants have some kind of containment vessel, and then the new units have additional, like a tank of water on the top. Okay, but otherwise, it's still a containment building that if there's a leak, it contains, and if there's something from the outside, it protects the inside from any outside forces. And then inside the steam generator, outside the tubes, is another system of water that is under less pressure, and that heat transfers from what we call the primary system, the nuclear water. The heat transfers through the tubes into the secondary system of water, and that water turns to steam. And for all 4 of our Vogtle units, there'll be 1 high pressure turbine and 3 low pressure turbines spinning at 1800 RPM. Okay, so different plants have different designs, but for us, it's 1 high pressure, 3 low pressure turbine, all on 1 shaft, spinning a generator rotor 1800 RPM. And then we use water from the cooling tower to condense that steam. Just like 1 pipe, there's literally thousands of tubes in 3 separate condensers underneath these 3 low pressure turbines. And that steam condenses the water in our condensers and gets pumped back in as a liquid. And then of course, the water from the cooling tower picks up the heat and it goes to our cooling towers about 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Different plants have different designs, but this is Vogtle 1, 2, 3, and 4, essentially pressurized water reactor. Now, for size purposes, these are the new turbine rotors. I think it's a mix of unit 3 and 4 photos here. These are the 3 low pressure turbine rotors. Of course, they're all attached, end to end on a shaft. And then we've actually conducted what they call hot functional testing. We have spun these turbine rotor generators at unit 3, 1800 RPM for like 15 minutes. All right. And then unit 4 yesterday, maybe over the weekend, we put it on our turning gear and ran it for a period of time. So we have run and spun our turbine generators to a little bit, but not yet to make electricity. And this is a generator rotor sliding into the stator, which is over to the right. And again, that will spin 1800 RPM. It's going to be about 1120, 30, 40, we're not quite sure, megawatts. Again, what we say in our public communications is each one of our units, including the new units, would generate enough power for 250,000 homes and businesses. So altogether be 1 million homes and businesses with all 4 units. And then just for kicks, I threw this picture in for y'all. This is at Vogtle Unit 1 a couple years ago when we took the rotor out of the generator and did a lot of rewinding inside the stator. And that gets done periodically. In fact, we're doing that right now at Plant Farley, one of our units. So that becomes a little bit longer outage because it takes a while to do that kind of work. Now, a little bit about the cooling towers. A lot of y'all probably seen cooling towers like this. But for Vogtle 1 and 2, they're 500, basically 50 feet tall. That's the height of the Washington Monument. 500,000 gallons of water per minute is flowing through the system. That water is from the Savannah River, which separates Georgia and South Carolina. And about 2 or 3% or so evaporates every minute, and about 1% is returned to the river. Really cool pictures here. There's a ladder going to the top to replace light bulbs. We had a guy rappel down the side of it not too long ago. If you walk in the door just above these columns, you look up and you see the sky. So it's a very efficient natural draft cooling machine. Air is pulled up through those columns, and when water sprays down and air flows up, you get some evaporation. And for us, it cools about 30-35 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's pretty darn good. It falls 60 feet, 500,000 gallons a minute. The water comes in at 120, goes back into the plant in the 80s degree Fahrenheit. And then, of course, we built 2 more cooling towers about 50 feet wider and 50 feet taller. The idea is that you're going to get even better cooling. As many of y'all know, the cooler the water going back into the condensers, the more megawatts we produce. And again, a picture walking in right above the columns, you see all the sprayers and the fill material that's inside, and then you look up and see the sky. And a really cool aerial photograph of the Unit 4 cooling tower. Now, y'all, any and every picture that I'm going to show today for Unit 3 and 4 is on our website. Go to georgiapower.com or southernnuclear.com. Go to Vogtle Pictures and you'll see them. I'm gonna also show you some videos. Those videos are on our Georgia Power YouTube channel. So nothing hidden here. All right, and I know y'all recorded this presentation as well. All right, so what I'd like to show you real quick, in Southern Company, we have Georgia Power, Alabama, and Mississippi Power, and we use all types of energy resources to keep the lights on and the air conditioner running here in Georgia or Southeast United States. So there's Vogtle since the late 80s, large power plants, PWRs, 18-month refueling cycles. Plant Hatch is in the 40-year-old range, built in the 70s, a bit smaller, a couple 100 megawatts smaller each. These are boiling water reactors, General Electric boiling water reactors. And then Plant Farley on the Chattahoochee River in Alabama, just over the Georgia-Alabama line, is also an older unit, 1977, 1981, a little bit larger than Hatch. It's a pressurized water reactors, both of us. We have 6 units on 3 sites currently. We will soon have 8 units on 3 sites with Vogtle 3 and 4. A couple of things to point out. One, you notice Vogtle has the natural draft cooling towers, and Farley and Hatch have mechanical draft cooling towers. So, you know, a lot of people think that all nuclear plants have natural draft cooling towers. In reality, in our company, only about 1/3 or 2/3 of the current units have 2/3 will have these mechanical draft cooling towers. So, you know, that's a big surprise for a lot of people. All right, now we use other forms of energy, obviously, fuels and energy for generating electricity. This is a gas plant, used to be a coal burning plant. We have converted some of our coal plants to gas for a variety of reasons: cost, environmental compliance, air quality, carbon, and so forth. We have hydro, of course. We have some large coal plants currently. Plant Share is to be shut down in the next 10 years or so. you know, better or worse, they have cooling towers like we do. There's a smokestacks. There's a big pile of coal, very large coal plant. Of course, we have solar, and then there's nuclear. So our company's philosophy is having a good energy mix of anything and everything, including conservation, energy efficiency to meet our customers' needs. And whatever that mix is, you know, will change over time. So with that in mind, this is worth looking at. In 2020, so 2 years ago, the capacity mix is on the left and the energy mix is on the right. All right. Now, the difference is capacity is everything that we have that's available to generate electricity, including some things that we purchase that's not ours. Because we purchase electricity from other companies, DSO, that's what that is, solar, maybe a little hydro or whatever, cogeneration. All right. It's all considered carbon-free as 30%. However, in real life, if you look at, just focus on nuclear, capacity is 9%. In real life, because we run our nuclear units 24/7, 365 days a year, except for about a month every year and a half, the real energy mix in 2020 for nuclear, that's Vogtle and Hatch, 4 units, is 24%. So 24%, almost a quarter of the electricity used by Georgia Power customers was from Vogtle and Hatch nuclear. Okay, so just take a look at that. Look at solar is 8% capacity. But let's be honest, half the time it's not sunny, right? At least half. Okay, I'm surprised this number is 4%, not 2 or 3%, but it's about 4% in actuality as far as electricity. You also notice that we burn more gas and less coal because gas is cheaper and the environmental credits and things like that. Okay, so that's 2020. And then if you look at projected for 2024, so if you go back one slide, carbon is 24%. I mean, not carbon, nuclear energy is 24%. 2024, that's when the new units are all running, both units are running. We're going to go from 24% to 33% nuclear. Okay, carbon-free nuclear. And then you can add the other carbon-free energy sources. We're going to hit our goal, which is by 2030, to be 50% carbon-free. So we're going to be hitting it here in mid-2000s, okay, 2020s. So 2024, we should be more than half carbon-free, right? Compared to, and that's energy, actual energy use, energy mix. Okay, so we're definitely reducing coal, eventually reducing gas, and adding nuclear and a lot of solar. So this is my company, Southern Company, and kind of mirrors the country to be net zero by 2050. Some of these technologies are still being worked on, as y'all well know. Next generation nuclear, hydrogen gas, energy storage, wind, y'all, is borderline in Georgia. It's just, we don't really have wind unless you go really, really high, tall. Solar, especially South Georgia, South Alabama, we have quite a bit of solar. This nuclear is us here at Vogtle, this section here. So we're modernizing hydro, we're using natural gas strategically, increasing solar, doing a lot of work on energy storage, spending billions on modernizing our grid, of course, energy efficiency, and then you start looking at carbon capture and things like that. So this is our company's goal. And when I get, college students here, I say, this is, these are careers and jobs and opportunity in the future. All right, so I'm gonna pause right there for a second and see what we have on questions or chat. Anybody want to jump in, they can as well.
On that last slide, there was a disclaimer about the retained renewable purchases.
Yeah, and that's, I don't fully 100% understand that. It goes back to us. There, for example, right by the Augusta Airport is a solar farm. It's not Georgia Power's. We buy the power from.
I see.
Okay, and then there's some buying and selling that we get. There's some credits and things like that. It's all very confusing. It's sort of like wetlands credits and things like that too. So there's some credits. There's purchasing from other companies, cogeneration type things that we also can consider if it's coming from renewable, non-carbon emitting sources. That counts as far as our carbon goals. Net carbon. All right. So I've mentioned Vogtle 1 and 2 a couple of times now. So what I like to do is just briefly hit the history of that, and then we'll get into 3 and 4. Vogtle 1 and 2 was a huge project. It was like many nuclear plants in this country being built in the 60s and 70s and 80s. There was a desire to build hundreds of nuclear power units. I've heard as many as 400, and then went down to 200. And of course, we ended up having about 100. When I started in this business 25 years ago, so there's like 104 nuclear units in the country. Now we're down to 92. But I know for a fact that Vogtle 1, 2, 3, and 4 was at one. I mean, Vogtle, the current Vogtle units 1 and 2, the early plans was to have 4 of them. Okay, and they cut back early before we did any construction and built 2. It was a huge project. If you've ever been down here, it's like 2 2-lane roads. I think one of them was dirt road when they began the project in the 70s. It was a gigantic project at the time. This was after 3 Mile Island, and once we really got into it, and inflation and commodity prices and gas prices went up, it became a very difficult build. It basically y'all went from $1 billion to $9 billion. That's quite a cost overrun. And we look back, though, it still was well worth it economically. Okay, as far as economic, it costs a lot to build, but it's cheap to run. Anyway, these are the reactor vessels. They were actually built in the United States and then shipped up or transported up the Savannah River from the port of Savannah via barge. And then they lifted them up off the barge and put them on these crawlers. So that's Vogtle 1 and 2 reactor vessels back in the 70s, early 80s. And then when this shows all the dates, we started in the 70s. They actually suspended construction in the mid-70s and restarted, and finally got these big guys online in 1987 and 1989. Like I said earlier, they've been the workhorse, they've been the base load, they've been the most economical energy supply that we have for base load power in all of our company. Now, if you look on this map, it shows the current 92 nuclear units. And actually, there's probably a dot or two on there that is no longer, like Palisades just closed down. That's up there in Michigan. It was 93 on this graph a couple of months ago. So we are still the largest country. We have the most number of reactors as any country in the world. We don't have the highest percentage, right? Like France has a higher percentage of nuclear energy. There used to be 2 down here in California, San Onofre. There used to be 2 more down, 1 more down here in Florida, Crystal River. There's several others, obviously, that have been shut down. Here's what's important here, though, is we are adding 2 more at Vogtle. So we're on the southeastern part of Georgia, and that 2 is going to be a 4 here in about, well, by 2024, by the end of 2023. So when this map gets updated in 2024 by the US NRC, it will have the 4-unit plant. A lot of you already know this here, but we use uranium isotope 235 as the main fissionable element, and 1 pellet for us is about 5% uranium 235. We do have a few test assemblies with 6% in unit. I think it's unit 1, might be unit 2. So we're doing some testing of some higher enriched fuel, and also the accident tolerant fuel. Some of y'all may be familiar with that. So we're the test reactors over at 1 and 2. But you see why we like nuclear. And for us, the fuel, we buy the fuel from Westinghouse, comes to us in fuel assemblies. Of course, we are involved in the purchasing of the uranium all the way to the enriching, to the assembly of the assemblies, and then they get transported to us. These are some recent, a recent shipment last year that has 10 fuel assemblies in it from Westinghouse. And that's out of South Carolina off of Interstate 20. And we're literally about 2 hours away from the fuel manufacturing plant. So we're one of their closest customers, maybe 2.5 hours. It just comes on the back of a truck. There's 10 on there. We replace about 80 every year and a half per reactor. So basically 8 of those trucks per year and a half per reactor is our fuel supply for units 1 and 2. It'd be very similar to that with 3 and 4. This is the fuel being offloaded and inspected by a variety of workers. You got some maintenance, you have some engineers, nuclear engineers here. There's a spent fuel pool off to the right in this picture on the bottom. We put them in these little dry cells before we put them in the pools, and then they eventually go into the reactor vessel. So Vogtle 1 and 2 has 193 assemblies each, and the new units will have 157. So smaller numbers, but taller. All right, and speaking of the new units, these are the reactor vessels for units 3 and 4. The 2 sitting at the top left, soon after they came in, they had a blue tarp around the outside. They were built in Japan and then South Korea, and then shipped over to the port of Savannah, and then trained over here to Vogtle. And this is what y'all were talking about at the beginning. We loaded, and y'all, this was a big day, big couple of days for us, right? We had a nice little celebration and put out some press releases. So after 10, 12 years of construction, we have put 157 fuel assemblies into unit 3. And y'all, that's just beautiful right there, right? It's all underwater. Not that it has to be yet. We don't have any, we haven't irradiated, we haven't split atoms yet. There are some neutron sources in there. Californium is my understanding to be the trigger for the chain reactions we're about to start. But October 17th, we put in the last fuel assembly, and everybody went, whoo, yay, way to go. And, you can also see the dark areas is where you're going to have the control rods. All right. So speaking of control rods, our control rods at 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, well, let me go back to the fuel assemblies. The fuel assemblies are 17 pins by 17 pins. And you see the numbers of fuel assemblies for each reactor at 1 and 2 compared to 3 and 4. Again, the fuel assemblies at 3 and 4 are about a foot taller. All right, so we get essentially the same amount of uranium in each reactor. There's something unique for the new design is there are some black rods and gray control rods. The black rods act like the control rods we have at 1 and 2. They're pretty much all in or all out. Okay, if they're all out, we're 100% power. You push them all in, there's 0% power. They absorb the neutrons. And for the gray rods, it allows for some fine tuning. So like if I go to the control room simulator for Vogtle 3 and 4, when they're training the operators, you see some of the gray rods in part way. Okay, so we can fine tune power with gray rods in addition to using boron. All right, so we use boron, flow, and then control rods to control power for the reactors. All right, I'm gonna pause here again. I see some chats, and maybe you can. Okay, general public, yes. And the foreign national. Here's the deal with all that. We foreign national, non-U.S. citizen, non-green card, valid green card, and all that. We have to do a little bit of vetting, I guess you would expect. We have plant tours. They range from our energy education center for kids to driving around the site to walking inside the plants. And sometimes going to control room simulators and things like that. So we tailor it toward the audience and what's going on in the plant. So yeah, we have people at the plant literally 4 days a week, probably visitors of some type. And I appreciate the great shots here. Let me see what else it is here. Oh, the primary delays for units 3 and 4. And lessons learned. So that's actually an easy question. We had a pretty good discussion about this the other day. Reactor vessels, steam generators, fuel, all that cost being delayed that's not the cost problem. The problem, the reason the cost went up, and by the way, they've gone from The cost for 3 and 4 started out being about 14 billion, well, actually 9 billion. And then it was 14 billion. Now it's probably 24 billion. Those are B's. That's not counting the financing costs. It's getting close to 30 billion with all the financing. It's because of the delays. And the delays can be attributed to several things, not to make excuses, but primarily when it's the first new plant built in this country in 35 years, using a brand new design for the United States. There are 4 of these plants built in China. Okay, they're done. They're running great. So there are some lessons learned from that. We visited there. They visited us from the 2 Chinese plants, Sanmen and Haiyang, if I'm pronouncing that right. But being the first of a kind, first for vendors, first for the regulators, first for us. And then, quite frankly, COVID didn't help either. But again, I don't want to make excuses. There is no doubt that Unit 4 has been built quicker, more streamlined, smoother, fewer problems than Unit 3. If you could build Unit 5 or 6 or build another AP1000 somewhere else, it would go much, much better because you're not the first of a kind. So I think that's the best way to answer that question. I know it is a sore subject, but it's reality. It is what it is. All right. So these are pictures at Vogtle 1 and 2, because we haven't done this yet for Vogtle 3 and 4. But every 18 months, for a pressurized water reactor that runs on 18-month cycles, we shut down the spring and fall when the demand for electricity is less. It says hundreds of contractors. A lot of times it's 1,000. We change out about 40% of the fuel. We used to say 1/3 of the fuel, but because of some power uprates, we actually change out a little bit more than 33%. But we flood the cavity. We take the reactor head package off. It's an integrated head package at 1 and 2, which is not all that common in the industry. We flood it with water because the fuel is highly radioactive and it has the blue Cherenkov radiation or effect coming from it. And we move all of our fuel, our process to move all 193 fuel assemblies at 1 and 2 to the spent fuel pool. Now, this is the Unit 1 or Unit 2, it could be either one, spent fuel pool. So this is where we store them. We stored fuel in here. We've re-racked it once or twice. Anyway, we basically had 25 years of fuel stored in one of these fuel assemblies for each unit. And to show you what the fuel pool, spent fuel pool looks like at Unit 3, this is a really good picture. All right, so you see the photograph on the right. It is showing the depth of the stainless steel pool. It has 8 of those racks down at the bottom. And then, of course, you fill it with water. This is clean, demineralized water with really bright white LED lights in a stainless steel pool, which is why I have that blue glow. It's not because of Cherenkov effect or radiation. We did put our 157 fuel assemblies on this side of the pool when they first came in. Of course, they're now gone. They're actually in the reactor. So that's what our new spent fuel pool looks like. It is smaller than what we have at 1 and 2. At best, 12 to 15 years of space. All right. What do we do after that? And I mentioned this earlier. We take our used fuel after it's been there 5, 10 years. For us, mostly 20-year fuel for 1 and 2, 25-year old fuel. It goes into a stainless steel canister that then goes into an outer canister that's 3 feet thick, metal wall, outer metal wall, metal inner wall, and then there's concrete filled in, and there's a gap in the middle to slide this canister, 120 tons. As y'all know, their fuel is highly radioactive, 3 feet of concrete, and that's what we do. So we store our fuel on site. Every single atom, every single fuel assembly at Vogtle ever used is either in the reactor vessel right now, in pools at 1 and 2, or in dry cast canisters like what I'm showing on here. And of course, y'all probably know this as much as anybody. We currently have no long-term storage like a Yucca Mountain, and we don't reprocess the United States. So this is what we do. We have a huge yard, enough for the life. I wouldn't say huge. It's huge looking to me, but if you look about, that's our waste product, which we don't call it a waste product, right? It's used nuclear fuel with a lot of goodies inside of it, uranium and other elements. But this is what we plan to do. This is enough for about 12 years of fuel in that space right there. And we have about that many inside the fence, somewhere back in there. And then we will end up filling this yard right here with fuel canisters for Vogtle 1 and 2. It's enough room for the life of the plant. So I'm gonna pause again. I'm not sure there's any chats, but anybody got any questions or clarification you want me to make? All right. So no yucca mountain. So our options are to reprocess, store it on site, maybe use it in some new way in the future. Okay. Now, another thing I want to point out to everybody is that if you come to Vogtle or go to any nuclear plant in this country, you're going to see something like this or another structure that may not have an igloo look like this. And you may not know what it is, but this is it. After Fukushima, which is hard to believe, y'all, was 2011, so it's been 11 years. The Fukushima event with the tsunami and the earthquake in Japan. As an industry, we all built some kind of robust structure to hold backup to the backup to the backup. I don't know how many backups it is of equipment. So pumps, generators, communications equipment, and other things that we would need. So we would have to pull it out and use a truck to carry it over and plug it into the plant. So these are our backup systems. This is supposed to, survive any kind of, major event like a tsunami or flooding or anything like that, tornadoes, et cetera. It's basically like a miniature containment. Okay, it's 3 feet of concrete and rebar and so forth. So anything from you guys at this point before I talk about the new plants?
Is the flex dome, is that like an industry common term?
It is.
For the
Flex dome.
post-Fukushima?
Yep. I call it Fukushima dome, flex dome, doomsday dome, zombie apocalypse, protection dome. Yeah, it's my understanding all of ours have the igloo look, but some of them may be, different types of buildings. It may be like a, regular building, but it's a concrete building that's designed to protect the equipment. All right, so if you came to my office, I'd be in this outer building. So this building is outside the fence at Vogtle 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is an artist rendering, but you see Vogtle 1 and Vogtle 2 since the 1980s. They are side by side. They're adjoined. They're mirror images of each other. The spent fuel pool and the control room is here in the middle. And then the turbine buildings are one large turbine building for Vogtle 1 and 2. So you go right to left, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a Savannah River and Savannah River site off here to the right. And then we have a central campus. So if you came here as an engineer, this is the engineering support building, is what we call it. It will be for all 4 units. This is security and emergency preparedness. This is a maintenance shop, and then these are warehouses here in the back. So the idea is to consolidate a lot of these buildings and these people, so we have a central campus between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. This building is our new, we call it a PAP, Personal Access Portal Security building, where it's kind of like going through a airport or something. There is a protected area fence that goes all around will go around 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you can walk from one side to the other side. It's quite a walk and be all within the fence. Okay. Unit 3, again, the tank of water I've referenced a few times on the top for passive safety features. We don't have that here. We have a Fukushima dome instead out here in the same shown on this artist rendering. So we don't, that Fukushima or flex dome is not for units 3 and 4. The equivalent to that essentially basically is a passive cooling system, i.e. this tank of water on the top that, flows by gravity, and water will evaporate. And when water evaporates, it cools. AP1000, Advanced Passive 1000, Westinghouse design. Looks like any other power plant. Reactor, steam generators, turbine generators, control rooms tucked there in the middle. But it has some passive cooling features like this tank of water on the top. There's a tank of water on the inside. So for like Vogtle 1 and 2 and every other nuclear plant I've worked at, this is my third, the tank of water we use to flood the cavity is actually inside the containment, okay, on these new plants. For like Vogtle 1 and 2, there's a tank off to the side where you would pump the water in during a refueling outage. But for us, it's inside the containment. Notice also there's a separate containment. This green thing is the containment. It's 1 3/4 inch thick steel. That's where, if we ever need it, which we plan never to, this is a really bad day at Vogtle. If you're using the water on the top for cooling, it actually sprays on top of the containment to keep the containment cool from the outside. Then the tank of water on the inside would flood the cavity, and you actually create like a convection cell on the inside. So there's a gap of air about 4 feet or so between the containment and the shield building on the outside. So you have a double metal wall with concrete in the middle, shield building, protect the plant from outside forces. And then you have a baffle system in here, and then you have basically a pressure vessel, the containment vessel. And the inside of that, reactor, 2 steam generators. We still have diesel generators, but they're not considered emergency diesel generators. They are backup or standby. And of course, we have lots of battery banks to run the controls. So anyway, slick design is digital compared to the old plants that are mostly analog. Even today, they have passive cooling features in addition to all their active systems. So a quick timeline here. The AP1000 is always, no matter where it's built, the standard design is 40 feet. The base mat is started at 40 feet below grade, below ground level. For this plant, we had to dig out 50 feet below that, basically a 90-foot deep excavation project down to this, basically the old ocean floor, the Blue Bluff Marl. And this was 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. We call it the Big Dig or the Big Fill after that. 22 million cubic yards of earth moved, and then engineered fill was compacted back in there. The big date for us was we received the first construction and operating license. That's a combined construction operating license from the NRC. So this is a new licensing process compared to all the other plants built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So we were the first to receive one. We did not set out to be first, and we certainly did not set out to be the only, but we are the only new nuclear plant being built in the country. I guess the last one standing, and it's going to pay off when we look back on this thing. But anyway, cool pictures here. Unit 3 and Unit 4 in 2010. Remember, we had to excavate 90 feet, and then we started doing all the backfill. Unit 4, that's excavated down to that white rock. Everybody around here likes to call us, we're living Georgia clay. True enough, but if you get down by 80, 90 feet, you start hitting ocean floor rocks, sedimentary rocks. And then this is Unit 3 with some of the backfill. All right, so look at that picture. That's 2010. This is where the nuclear power plant and the turbine building would go for Unit 3, and this is where it is for Unit 4. The cooling towers go out here to the far side of this photo. All right, 2010. 2 years later, it looked like this. So just take a look. The excavated area for Unit 3 is now a nuclear island with 6 feet of rebar and a turbine building construction, and the Unit 4 is over to the side. That's the other excavated area. You can see the outline of the cooling towers. We had the world's largest land-based heavy lift derrick crane at the time. It rotated and provided the lifts for Unit 3, nuclear and turbine islands, and Unit 4. Okay, so you see this plant's was being built in modular sections. So these are all modules being assembled or fabricated off to the side and inside this modular assembly building. And then when you put 6 feet of rebar in, you got to have 6 feet of concrete. So we had a 41-hour concrete pour. And it's a lot more exciting to watch it on a 45-second time lapse than it is watching it in real time. But this is night shift, and it's about to become day shift. We have about 500 people involved each shift. in the hole and then outside the hole. All the concrete is mixed and batched right here on site, using all the constituents of concrete. Whoops, let's see. Oh, you saw another one in solid. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm gonna keep going here. If you look on this video, the round area is where containment and the reactor vessel is now, right? It goes up. On the far side is where the spent fuel pool is currently for unit 3. Then all this stuff here is the non-radiation side of the nuclear island, the control room, the controls, the pipe pathway and all that. Okay, so this is the base of this basement is 40 feet, so that's 6 feet, so that's about 34 deep, 34 feet down into this hole for the nuclear island. That was in 2013 for both units. This is 2014. I'm not going to spend too much time on the cooling towers, but you can see how the cooling towers are going up. You know, they have nothing to do with nuclear plant. We haven't coal plants, but it was really cool to see these things go up over about 3 or 4 or 5 years. But if you look in the nuclear island part, all that concrete is cured or is curing. You put the lower head on it, okay, just like you have here at Unit 4. These are plates of metal that came from Japan, and then we welded together here on the side, off to the side. So you see these rings. These are the containment vessel rings off to the right that then sit on top of these bottom bowls or heads. Sometimes we call it the world's largest wok. All right. The reactor vessel goes into the reactor cavity, which you see in this picture here. This building is the auxiliary building that houses the spent fuel pool. All the fuel handling stuff is in this building. It was fabricated way over here in the modular assembly building. It was made of 72 sub-modules, and then it was crawled down this road and the crane put it in there. Okay, so this is the auxiliary building. The annex building goes off to the side here. And then the Unit 4 auxiliary building is still being constructed inside the modular assembly building. 2 years later, both cooling towers are done. We have people in the neighborhood saying, hey, when are you going to crank up those towers? All right. And of course, the towers are just for cooling. They're the radiator of the plant. The power plant is the critical path. So here's Unit 3 nuclear plant, turbine side, Unit 4 nuclear side, and turbine side. Here's one of the rings that's about to be placed on top of another ring. All right, so if you look real carefully inside the Unit 3 containment vessel, there's a building in there, and that building was assembled, and here it is coming out of the fuel, of the, what do you call it? The modular assembly building. So this is another time-lapse video. Let's see, about a 5-story building, 1,200 tons. Metal walls, and most of that there's inner walls and outer walls. So if you look carefully, you have with these 2 steam generators fit in, and then you have the reactor cavity, the refuel cavity, and the pressurizer cavity is all in this building here. All right, so anyway, this is that hole right there is the fuel transfer canal that connects the refuel cavity to the spent fuel pool. All right, so really cool thing to see happen. That was actually fun in real time. And then Unit 3, we placed the 3rd of the containment rings on it. Give you an idea of the sizes of these. Again, all these pictures are available online. 2 million pounds. We use a different crane by now. We're using a mobile Lamson crane. And then we put the steam generators in before you put the lid on, before you put the dome on, you put the steam generators. This steam generator came from South Korea, Doosan Industries, and 630 tons is my understanding. You see where the steam will come out the top, and each one of these steam generators houses or holds 10,000 tubes. It's a very special inner alloy for the tubes. The outer parts is carbon steel, which is why you see the rust on there. Of course, that gets cleaned up once it gets put into the plant. The reactor coolant pumps actually insert into the bottom of these nozzles. So a lot of nuclear plants, the reactor coolant pumps off to the side and there's a pipe. But for these new units, the reactor coolant pumps actually insert inverted up into the steam generator on those nozzles. So we're just clicking on, y'all. It was we started, the first picture was 2010, now we're 2018. The steam generator is already in unit 3. I don't think they're yet in unit 4. These are the last, whoops, let me go back. This is the third ring for containment for unit 3, and there's a dome for unit 3, and then this is the middle ring and the third ring, and then the containment dome for unit 4. You can see how they're welded together. All these plates came in from Japan and then got welded here by CB&I Services, did the welding on those. So unit 4 in the foreground, unit 3, unit 2, and 1 in the background. And then I mentioned this, that there's a shield building that goes on the outside of the containment to protect from outside force. You see there's a double metal wall with space for concrete. It's about 3 feet of concrete that is placed in there afterwards. And of course, once you get all the big stuff inside, you put the dome on it. And this is 2019. We put the dome on unit 3 in March of 19. And I think it was November, December, we did it for unit 4. So we did, we put both of them in within about 9 months of each other. I put them on top. And of course, all this has to fit, right? I mean, you're not going to bend it in place. So very precise engineering and construction. All right, and then to finish it out, to place a tank of water on the top, you have to have a roof. You don't put it on top of the containment pressure vessel. So this is the roof being placed on top. I'm going to skip the video because of time, but you can go online and find it yourself. And then this is the large tank of water. It's called a passive water. It's exterior to the containment, again, so water can spray. You'll see I got some video links here. You can find them yourself on YouTube of this being placed. 750,000 gallons of water. And in 2020, you see unit 3 with the rebar placed around the outside of the tank. So you can then place concrete or pour concrete in it. This is unit 4 with the containment dome. I mean, unit 3 looks like a power plant now in a lot of ways. You see security fighting position on the corners here. These are security places where they can, security can, shoot from. As y'all know, we have a lot of security around these plants. This is unit 3. I'm sorry, 3 in the background, the concrete all around the containment and the roof and the tank of water. Here's unit 4 in the foreground. And then November of last year, basically a year ago, unit 4 in the foreground, unit 3, unit 2, unit 1. Way back there, Savannah River site, different reactors and other things back there in the Savannah River site. And then January of this year, so about 10 months ago, it looked like this. And we're in the process of testing. This is through a window in the unit 3 control room just a couple of weeks ago. You see us a lot of computers. It's not the old style analog systems. We do have a few switches here in the middle. And that's the old control rooms. All right. And this is basically where we are. We're going to have the first new nuclear plants built in the last 35 years or so. But the only 4-unit plant. And then you see the dates there. By the end of next year, we should have both units running, and it'd be enough electricity to power 1 million homes and businesses. So I'm going to stop there. I know we had a couple questions, a couple things we talked about on the way through, but see what else you may have.
Well, it's extremely impressive. I think I've seen photos of the construction progress, but this really gives you the sense of scale of this operation. As a national lab in our, test reactors, everything is much smaller, very highly concentrated. work, on very small, detailed, scope, and just seeing the full scale of this come together is just impressive. I think there are a few chat questions up at the top that we may have missed, but we can go through those. It's a small enough group. People are quiet. Go ahead and unmute and ask a question if you'd like to.
Hey, the dog's got a question.
Sorry, there's squirrels in the neighborhood. It's new.
Yeah, but I think we talked about delays and then therefore the cost. One thing that y'all may find interesting is Georgia, I see Southern Nuclear, Southern Company, and Georgia Power almost interchangeably. If you want to buy stock in our company, it's Southern Company, it's SO on the stock exchange. But within Southern Company, there's Georgia Power, and Alabama Power, Mississippi Power, Atlanta Gas and Light, the Southern Company Gas. We have Power Secure, got a bunch of subsidiaries, companies basically. And one of them is Southern Nuclear. So Southern Nuclear maintains and operates, and it has the lead on building these new units on behalf of our co-owners. So our co-owners at Vogtle is Georgia Power at 45.7%. And then there's Oglethorpe Power. Oglethorpe Power are the co-ops. And I don't know y'all's landscape there as far as electricity goes, but co-ops are electric membership corporations. So like the credit unions in banking world, they're the not-for-profit type, more rural traditionally, although Cobb, EMC, and Atlanta is far from rural in these days. Anyway, they own 30%, and they have people on site that work there. And for example, we support co-ops, the co-ops in the Oglethorpe when they bring people, investors, just like Georgia Power brings investors, key leaders, community leaders, elected officials, employees to the site to see these units and to kind of build support. So 45.7% is Georgia Power, 30% is Oglethorpe, and then 22%, almost 23% are cities, mostly through MEAG, which is the Municipal Electric Authority of Georgia. And believe it or not, their ownership of Vogtle and Plant Hatch puts them at a higher percentage of nuclear for their customers than Georgia Power is. So I was showing y'all 24%, maybe 30 to 35% here in a couple of years for Georgia Power. But for Oglethorpe and the cities and the municipalities, it's more like 40 or 50% of their electricity is coming from the nuclear sites in Georgia. So nuclear plays a huge role, and it's getting larger, right, in Georgia. One last thing is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the original license from the NRC is 40 years. But you can renew or extend the license in 20-year increments. We've already done that for Vogtle 1 and 2, Hatch 1 and 2, and Farley 1 and 2. So we're now operating on 60-year licenses. And we announced just recently that we are going to extend the license, or we're going for a license renewal or license extension for Hatch to make another 20 years, which would be 60 years. So we fully expect to run all 6 of our existing units for at least 60 years, maybe 80 years. So if you look at all of our communications about Vogtle 3 and 4, we're saying this is going to provide that base load 24/7, carbon-free, reliable, safely generated energy for 60 to 80 years. That's how it pays for itself, okay? You don't build a nuclear plant thinking 10, 20-year payoff periods. You actually build them, the amortization is like 40 years. But the reason our rates are below the national average in Georgia in large part is because of Hatch and Vogtle 1 and 2. Now that's going to go up a little bit with 3 and 4, but eventually it will become the downward pressure on the cost for electricity in this part of the country. So I got on my soapbox here a little bit, but that's an important point to make on the cost piece.
That's a very good point. We make a lot of the same arguments up in this part of the country, up in the Northwest. The biggest differences are in the power split. We have a lot of hydro in this area that help pump up our low carbon numbers, but we only have one plant operating in the Northwest up in Washington. But as far as R&D side, this has been very useful, in the public affairs world. We often spend a lot of time explaining the difference between our test reactors and commercial, pressurized water reactors. And so I might ask your permission to use some of these graphics. So since I'd like to use, the newest version of a PWR instead of some of our, other cartoon diagrams look like a couple of the ones of your 1 and 2. But it's all very, very useful information. Does anyone else have more questions for Mike? A lot of compliments on the presentation.
I appreciate someone clarifying it here too. I should have been more aware of this, that INL has worked with Southern Nuclear Advanced Reactor Licensing Research and also the TerraPower molten salt reactor. Yeah.
Very true.
It's really interesting. It'd be interesting to see where we go with all this in the next, I don't know, couple of decades, right? So, and we all, and I'm sure you all probably feel the same way, you can't reduce carbon or minimize the increase of carbon or reduce carbon without nuclear. I mean, it's hard to imagine unless somebody comes up with something a lot better. So anyway, we're bullish. I don't think we get more questions right here about when you're going to build Vogtle 5 and 6. Well, that's not going to happen anytime soon. But we're going to let these guys run, and some of y'all may know that there are some started in South Carolina that stopped about midway, and it'd be nice to see those get finished one day. These are the AP1000s. There's some other companies that have some licensing done and site selection. And we have site selection in another location on the western part of the state, but it sounds like we're all going to be on hold for a little while and see what happens over the next few years. And maybe some of the research y'all are doing will help us out as moving forward.
Yep. Had a couple more questions out of the chat that I think we may have missed, unless you covered them. Darren Stepler asks, are there any plans to convert any of the coal or gas plants to small modular reactors? As we're hearing about in some of our information from the industry.
We hear about it more industry than we've heard it within our company. We have converted some coal plants to natural gas, and we have other coal plants that are filled with gravel. But you are correct. It would be really some of these old coal burning plants or even gas plants. We already have the transmission lines. We have the infrastructure. We own the land. We already have the water, whatever. It'd be a really good location for small modular reactors, or who knows, a new generation.
Okay, and then another one.
No doubt about it. But right now, our focus, if you talk to any executive in our company, is we're going to get 3 and 4 finished, focus on that. Then we'll look back, we'll look again one day, right? But not now.
It's understandable. There was one other question about hydrogen, going back to your energy mix slide. Do you group hydrogen as part of energy storage or use it in transportation or other uses of hydrogen?
I think that's to be determined. I just hear a lot about it we have a company town hall or anything in the industry is about, hydrogen, especially these new reactors, right? It's another product. And it can be used for, lots of energy, carbon-free purposes. So I don't know if y'all know this, but across the river, the Savannah River site, I don't know, I guess it's still there. There's a hydrogen research facility. And they actually they have some hydrogen powered vehicles there and they do research on them. That's also the tritium reprocessing center, or one of them, for our H bombs, the hydrogen bombs. So you got to reprocess and re-enrich whatever the tritium. So they work a lot with hydrogen across the river at Savannah River site.
Yeah, we do a little of that kind of research here as well. We do some work with high temperature electrolysis, and we have integrated energy systems group. If we can repay the favor sometime with you taking the time to brief us on this, we can give you a little rundown of what we do.
Actually, we ought to do more of that kind of thing. We've talked about that here at the Savannah River site. We're like two different worlds. I mean, you go home and my neighbors are SRS employees, right? I mean, they have about 14,000 people over there. We have a couple of thousand counting construction. But we don't really do much. I mean, we're across the river, but you have to drive about an hour and a half to get there instead of just right. We wish we had a little bridge, just drive right over. Yeah, what do y'all think on the hydrogen? Where's the future for hydrogen in your view?
Well, besides just on the production side, there's, seems to be a lot of renewed interest in, hydrogen for transportation, fuel cells.
Yeah.
I'm actually not up to speed on, on where we're at with that. I work out at our advanced test reactor. So I'm a little bit behind the times when it comes to our larger research programs. One of them might be interested, at least as far as Unit 1 and 2, is we have a big role leading the DOE's light water reactor sustainability program. And they do a lot of work with the commercial world, looking at supporting license extension efforts and that kind of thing. And improving, practices and, adding tools that help extend the life of the current fleet.
Well, I appreciate what Brian Gross wrote. Can't wait to see all 4 reactors powered up and running. I think you're here in national news, right? I mean, y'all probably follow the industry news anyhow. I mean, we're talking who might show up when we crank up Unit 3 and Unit 4, right? I mean, all the way up to the POTUS, President of the United States, right? So we've had all the energy secretaries here, except for the most recent one. We had Catherine, is it Huff? Dr. Huff here recently.
Yep.
From the nuclear offices.
She leads the nuclear Office of Nuclear Energy, and
yeah,
she's been here recently as well. So I'd be amazed if not her or the Secretary of Energy, or that'll be a big enough deal. It wouldn't surprise me if you get a presidential visit.
Yeah, we're having with all the owners, co-owners, and the partners like Westinghouse. Every 2 weeks, we're having a meeting about what we're going to do and where we are with getting these online and media interactions and elected officials and all that stuff. So we're gearing up for it. We don't want to get ahead of the cart though, but anyway. All right, well, listen, I enjoyed it, y'all, and proud to be part of it.
All right, well, thank you very much for taking the time, and let me know if we can repay the favor at some point.
Okay, I love it. Appreciate you.
Yep. Thanks very much.
All right, bye now.